guy's got a light.
Hey, thanks for checking out the videos. I hope you'll consider subscribing to the channel. Throughout the off season, I've been lifting a lot of weights and trying to get stronger. I've also been riding a lot of my local trails out in the national forest. I've even been trying some new things like taking an ice bath, which has definitely helped with the inflammation, but it is pretty difficult to do. This will be my first training trip of the season up to Windrock. Steven moved up to Windrock last September, so he's been riding all during the off season. When I got there, it was not terribly cold, but it was raining, and then it eventually started hailing. But this would be as good a time as any to start breaking in my new downhill bike. I was running an Assegai in the front and a DHR2 in the rear. Windrock is a pretty special place for me and for Steven. It's the first place we ever raced downhill, and it has probably some of the steepest and toughest courses on the East Coast. It's kind of a mix between being incredibly awesome and incredibly scary at the same time. And I've gotten pretty seriously hurt at Windrock, but it's definitely the go-to place when you want to break your bike in and you want to see where you stand. So right away, you know, it's a little nerve-wracking. You have a brand new bike. You've been tinkering with it for a long time. I rode a little bit locally, but I really wasn't sure how some of the decisions that I'd made and how I'd set the bike up, how that would stand. So all I could really do was just start running laps. There's luckily two trails which I've ridden a lot. One of them happens to be used as a race course quite often, called Dropout. The other is Talladega, which is a bit of a jump trail. So my plan really was to just start running laps after laps on Dropout and just kind of make adjustments to the bike as I needed or see where I stood. And so even though the course was, or even though it was pretty wet outside, it actually had drained off pretty quickly, and it wasn't as muddy as I've seen it in the past at Windrock. Sometimes if it's gotten just days and days and days of rain and it doesn't shed off, it can basically be like peanut butter. So right away I noticed that I was getting kicked a little bit on some of the jumps, but I just decided to not make any adjustments right away, but just, you know, get a handful of laps in and then really just see where I stood. So this is a trail that I've ridden a lot on. I think this was actually the first downhill race course that I ever was on, and it was last year's downhill Southeast race course as well. And so this is just a great place for me to see where I stand and give it a go. So I just did lap after lap after lap here until I started to feel more and more comfortable. And I will say right away, I just really appreciated having the downhill bike, and I felt like I was, for the first time, actually inside the bike, I guess is the best way I know how to describe it. I just felt much more connected, sort of into the bike. Whereas on the Enduro, I've always felt like I was sitting up on top of it. I always kind of felt like I was pinging off of things. And I know the added suspension certainly helps, but I also really enjoy the feel of a coil, especially at Windrock. I had Steven's old downhill bike for a while, which had an Ohlins coil in the rear. And then I had actually built an Intense and put a coil on it and actually snapped the frame the first day that I took it to Windrock a few years. But I always liked that sort of coil feel. And so right away, the bike was very planted. It was very confidence inspiring, and even though I was a little jittery because I didn't want to tear it up, I didn't want to, you know, break something right away. I felt good on the bike right from the get-go, and so it was great. I just ran lap after lap after lap, and so the first day we ended up, I don't know exactly how many laps I did, but I did run Strava on my watch, and I think I got to over 20 miles, which does include the shuttles, but that's usually kind of my stopping point. I've learned over many trips up to Windrock to not push. There's sort of this certain place where you kind of warm up for a few laps, and then you kind of get to your peak, and then once you start to kind of make some mistakes or get a little too tired, then you definitely want to cut it off. And so, you know, I got the bike set up. I had a few rounds, and started to kind of get feel better and better. Started building up my speed, and then eventually it was time to cut it off. And I was getting pretty cold, and I was getting pretty wet, and like I said, it was actually hailing, so it was good. One thing that I did as I did more and more laps on Dropout is eventually I moved over and I did a lap on Snake Rock, which has been pretty much, I guess, sort of the ceiling for me, if you will, at Windrock. It's definitely the trail that sort of, you know, I've made it down Snake Rock, I guess is the best way I know how to say it, a few times, but I've never really ridden it confidently, and it's usually kind of where my level ends with regards to Windrock. And so I was able to do a few things right away that I previously had not been able to do, but the conditions were pretty bad. And so, you know, after having a few slip outs and having to walk in a few different sections, it was pretty much time to knock it off.
You going?
Yeah, I just couldn't hold the line there. I go to the car and then I might come back up here and buy something.
What time is it?
2. I'm at 20 miles right now.
Will you meet me at the Windrock camp?
After a good first day, it was time to go have some fun and get some dinner at the Brazilian steakhouse, which always starts out well, and you get these little green cards and they bring you tons of meat, but then eventually you kind of reach your meat limit. But it was fun. Me, Steven, and Cameron had a good time. So the second day was pretty much a polar opposite of the first day. It was absolutely beautiful outside. I also got to pick up my second set of wheels that I had built for running my mud tires. I got DT Swiss just like the cut from the factory, and Steven actually got a new rear wheel with a factor hub. So the plan for today was to pretty much run more laps at Dropout, though I did want to try a couple of other trails by myself so that I could just sort of work through where I was at confidence-wise and where I was with the bike. And, you know, I couldn't have asked for a better day. Is a trail that was used by Downhill Southeast in 2021 for the race, and I always liked this old, though now it's kind of rutted out, used to be sort of a loam section, but I just headed over there by myself and just wanted to kind of see where I was at. And you know, it's always kind of interesting to ride a trail that you've had a race on and you've had some, you know, all different types of experiences. I've ridden this trail on a number of different bikes. I think I rode it on the Enduro in the race. Yeah, I did. I rode it on the Enduro, and so I've had a lot of experience on this trail. It's a fun trail. Much like Dropout, it's one of those trails that you can kind of ride it slow, or if you push the pace on it, it becomes harder and harder. And I think that's where they really shine in terms of being used as race courses. And of course, I did hit a tree. And then after that, we went back to Snake Rock since it was dry, and it was definitely a little better experience in terms of the first round. And so everything was just getting more and more dialed, and I was starting to feel more and more comfortable on the bike. And you know, it was an exciting feeling just doing things that you know, just progressing right away and just taking that next level that I think, you know, it wasn't just the bike. I also had been riding consistently. I had gone out west, I had been to Whistler. I really had not stopped after the downhill season, so it really just kind of all, you know, it all came together. And I think this these next clips here, where actually I had gotten Steven to do some POV of me on Talladega. Again, another trail that I've spent a lot of time on, but like right here, that's the first time I really had ever cleared that double.
Wow.
I'd always been apprehensive, especially on the Enduro bike. And you know, just for me personally, watching this POV, I can see the progression. I can see where I've gotten more confident, and I think just, you know, it all came together. The bike came together, the skill came together, and I'm really excited to see what'll happen this race season.
That is a slick one. You like it?
Yeah, I might hit stuff with confidence. You've never seen me hit that stuff with confidence, have you?
No. Yeah, it's a good bike. Yeah. I'll tell you when I'm rolling.
During the winter, I believe starting in November, Windrock has a winter race league where they have a time trial each month, and so it's a different trail each month. For this last race, they'd be using the upper section of Snake Rock, and Steven had actually done one run with his chain but missed the actual ending of the course through some confusion, so he got to do a second lap, but he did it chainless, and he actually got second place. So that was a pretty good marker for him to see where he's at, and he had a lot of fun. And I think these are great for just kind of continuing to stay active in the off season, and it gives a lot of people a chance to also just sort of see where they're at and see where they're training and how everything's paying off. So on the way home, just outside of Chattanooga is the Trials Training Center, which is where the first Downhill Southeast race would be. I've actually raced an Enduro here before, and Steven and I stopped in. This would be on the way home for me, and about 2 hours from Oak Ridge for him. And so we just stopped in, we did a course walk, and I took some video of some of the different features, and we just took a look at things. and it's a very interesting place. It's very sort of shaly. The rock is a little different. It has kind of that Windrock feel, maybe just a little less developed. Real pretty views here for where the race course actually starts. There's some interesting big rock formation features, and then there's this road gap, which is kind of like a little, I don't know, highlighted feature, I guess. Steven said they've actually improved it from last year, but you know, we did the track walk, and I felt like we got a good feel for how rocky it was, how steep it was. It reminded me of when I did the enduro here. And then I actually shuttled Steven for 3 laps, and so he was actually able to POV a couple of runs, and that was a really big trip. And so I appreciate you watching the video. You know, it was a good way for me to kick off the season, and I'm looking forward to the race season starting. Take care.